So today we're going to be looking at a bunch of different micro SD cards you can get off Amazon, and specifically we're going to try and figure out which one of these SD cards is giving the best performance for the lowest price. So I picked out 5 different micro SD cards that had the best reviews and the best pricing on Amazon, and we're going to look specifically at the performance of these different cards. So looking at either the reviews or just the product descriptions on Amazon, you really have a hard time figuring out which one of these cards is actually going to be the best performing, because some of the numbers the manufacturers put out really don't tell you that much about the real world performance. So when we look at some of this packaging from these cards, so these are UHS-I cards in the 128, 256 gigabyte range. So here, usually we can see somewhere around like 100 megabytes per second read, 90 write. On these SanDisk cards, we actually have an even higher speed that's actually above the UHS-I specification, which tops out at 104 megabytes per second read. Here, SanDisk is actually advertising 160 read, 90 write. And some of the Chinese newcomers that, as you can see, I just have this printout because this card has gone back to Amazon, are again boasting these 100 megabyte per second read values. So if you're lucky, at the bottom of the Amazon reviews, you'll have somebody posting a crystal disk test of the card, and they'll give you some numbers, and you can base your buying decision on that. But let's actually have a look at the specific numbers we have for these cards. So the 5 cards I ordered in were your standard cheapo Intenso brand card. This is this one here, the 32 gigabyte. Super cheap at less than €4 a card. I've calculated out the price per gigabyte too, so you can really compare the different brands. This is just a Class 10 card, your bog standard thing you can stuff in some kind of surveillance camera or something. Then we have this NetAC Chinese brand, 128 gigabyte, UHS-I, speed class 3, so this is 30 megabytes per second guaranteed. Application class 1, which just gives you an indication about the input and output operations it can do. This is something you might want to look at if you're putting these cards in a Raspberry Pi or something that's going to be doing long-term kind of computation, running a server, running an OS. And then we have this V30 indication, which is showing you basically the video performance for something like a GoPro. It's basically promising 30 megabytes per second writing speed so that you can record 4K basically. So pricing-wise, the NetAC, which after a bit of reading I'm told is a brand that's fairly common in China, and they have a fairly good name there. So I just wanted to see if you can really get a deal on no-name card, but that actually has the engineering to back it up. So this was about €19. Then we have the Samsung Evo Select cards. So I have 2 of those, the 128 gigabyte version and the 256. They're both only classed as UHS-I speed class 3. And you often see the kind of duality. You have the Samsung Evo Select and the Evo Plus. The Select is just an Amazon branding deal that Samsung has. So the Plus and the Select is exactly the same card. The Select is green, the Plus is red, but it's the same kind of chipset inside. So price-wise, these are doing really well. These are cards I've had before, and I've considered these to be pretty much the best deal in SD cards you can get off Amazon right now. So we have €18 for the smaller version and $37.99 for the bigger one. I managed to get the larger one on Prime Day for a much lower price. So this is just the blue pricing in brackets there. And then finally, we have the SanDisk Extreme 128 gigabyte card, pricing in at €22. I also got that a little bit cheaper on Prime Day. Fairly similar specs to the Samsung Evo. Only thing different is that it's giving us an A2 V30 classification. So theoretically, that could be a little bit better than the Samsung, but we'll see in our testing if that actually turns out to be true. So finally, I wanted to get the SanDisk branded microSD reader to test these cards. For most of my testing, I've been using this Ugreen SD card reader, micro SD card and SD card on this short USB 3 cable. But I wanted to make sure that I also had one of these SanDisk readers, because the performance that we had on one of these SanDisk cards was actually exceeding the UHS-I specs. So after looking at a little bit more information, I actually figured out that SanDisk, if you look at the small print somewhere in here, they're going to tell you that to achieve this 160 megabyte per second read value, you're actually going to have to use their, let's say, proprietary card reader. So this little guy came in fairly cheap at 8 euros. It's very nice and compact, and if it actually gives us the speeds that are being promised, this would actually be one of my primary micro SD card readers, just for having around the cameras on the road and stuff, something you can just plug into the laptop and that takes up as little real estate as possible compared to this kind of bulky Ugreen version. So if we get our crystal disk measurements out here, we can compare the performance of these different cards. So first we have the little cheapy Intenso card. This is just basically testing my method. I did 2 runs on each card. One is running the Ugreen USB 3 SD card reader, and the bottom one here with the plus symbol is using the small SanDisk branded micro SD card reader. So we can see on the 32 gigabyte version, speeds are fairly decent for class 10 card. We have basically 23 megabytes per second read and 16 writes on the larger sequential files. Going down to the random reads of the smaller files, it gets quite a bit slower, as is always expected with SD card memory. And we basically have very similar results using the SanDisk branded one. So if we bring in the Samsung cards, this is where we see really good performance for a price. So the SanDisk cards, both the 256 and the 128 gigabyte version, we're seeing speeds really close to that promised, I guess, what was it? Yeah, 100 megabytes read, 90 write. So we're fairly close there. We can see that the bigger capacity card here on the left is giving us slightly better performance. That's fairly common, that the larger capacity chipsets perform just a little bit faster than the smaller ones. But when we test it with the small SanDisk reader, we really don't see that much of a difference. So our numbers really stay fairly similar. And if we bring in our Chinese NetEC card, I was hoping that this would be kind of a hidden sleeper performance type of deal, but unfortunately that is not reality. So if we look at the read and write speeds in the bigger sequential files, they're fairly close to both their spec and to the Samsung card, but where we notice this big drop-off is with the write speeds of the smaller random files. So these are really atrocious. At 0.06 megabytes per second, you're going to be waiting a long time trying to transfer a bunch of little files with the NetEC card. And as we see, really the performance doesn't change using the SanDisk small card reader. So up until now, the SanDisk reader has been pretty useless. I mean, there hasn't been much of a performance increase with any of the cards. But if we bring in the SanDisk card, we can really see that SanDisk reader shine. So if we look at the values here, we can see that they're fairly close to the Samsung card. We have 96 and 89 megabytes read and write, so fairly close to the sort of promised Samsung 190 spec. But when we go down here and look at the performance with the SanDisk card reader, we really see that number jump. So a lot of the reviews that I saw on Amazon were saying, what kind of ripoff is this? They're lying to us. I mean, these 160 numbers are unattainable. And if you test it in either a laptop or a USB 3 card reader that doesn't have this SanDisk protocol, it's actually true. I mean, they really can't reach the numbers they promise. But when you get into the little SanDisk micro SD card reader, it really gives quite a boost in performance. So we're looking at almost 50% faster read and write speeds with the card. So you really have to ask yourself, why is this SanDisk card performing differently with a fairly cheap looking and cheaply priced card reader? So the thing we have going on basically is that there's different standards in the UHS-I protocol. So when we use the different card readers, sometimes you can really see a difference, especially going from USB 2 to USB 3, like we have in the Ugreen card reader. But even going into some of these kind of specialty protocols, we'll call it for now, that SanDisk is apparently using, they can actually get much better speeds out of the UHS-I protocol that's theoretically limited to only 104 megabytes per second. So the UHS-I protocol has 3 clock speeds that the SD cards operate at. So 50 megahertz, 100 megahertz, and 208 megahertz. And what they're basically doing, for every clock cycle, they have 2 types of data transmission. So they can do double data rate, which is 8 bytes for every clock cycle, or 4 bits per clock cycle. So they can do single data rate at 100 megahertz, so you get 50 megabytes per second performance out of that. You can do single data rate at 208 megahertz. You can get the maximum up until now 104 megabytes per second. If you go even slower but switch to double data rate at 50 megahertz a second, you can get 50 megabytes a second. And this is the protocol SanDisk, and we'll see some other companies are using to get that little bit of extra performance out of UHS-I. So there's something called double data rate 208 or just 200. It's basically the same thing. And this enables them to use the faster clock speed that pretty much all of these SD cards are now capable of, and to pull out 178 megabytes per second theoretical speeds. And if we look at the values we got out of the SanDisk card, they're getting fairly close to those numbers. So this, I was calling it a specialty protocol, but it's actually part of the UHS-I standard. So it's really just up to the manufacturers to implement this clock speed and data transmission rate. So I think even Samsung could be operating at this speed, but it's probably just a marketing and sales tactic, basically not to enable these faster speeds. So we have 4 companies that I've been able to find that sell UHS-I cards that have this faster protocol. So as we've seen, we have our SanDisk, the Extreme and the Extreme Pro lines that are offering the increased speeds. And apparently you can get this same performance using the same standard from the Lexar 1066 speed class cards they have, the Kingston Canvas Go Plus, and the My Memory Pro SD. So all of these cards are available on Amazon. Price-wise, for now, the SanDisk has been the best deal I've found so far, but all of these other ones are available and aren't too different as far as price is concerned. So if you're looking to get into an SD card ecosystem, either for your cameras or for drones or for Android phones you want to expand your memory in, or I have a Raspberry Pi running, so that's something I'd pick the A2 class cards for. So it really doesn't cost any much more to get into the set of cards that supports this faster data protocol. So if we look back at the prices here, the SanDisk cards per gigabyte aren't that much more expensive than the Samsung ones that don't provide this additional speed boost. And really the cost of entry is just the €8 to get their proprietary, non-proprietary SD card reader, and then just fill out your collection with cards that are actually capable of these increased speeds. So up until now, I've mostly had the Samsung Evo Plus cards, but if I were starting off again, getting new cards or upgrading my collection, definitely go with one of the cards that support this faster protocol. And if you want faster speeds, of course, you can go into UHS-2 or 3, but those actually have additional pins and different pinouts and compatibility problems It's only very few devices, I think, still can accept these faster cards. But if you want to stay with UHS-I and have it basically compatible with all your devices, definitely pick up one of these, especially these SanDisk ones that seem to be priced quite well, and they basically shorten your transfer times by a third compared to copying off large data files off of the Samsung cards. So the only issue I've had with the SanDisk card reader here, it's a tiny little thing, fits very compactly in your laptop, but the contacts inside are a little bit iffy. So when you put a card in, it doesn't have that spring interface to pop it out. So you have to kind of grip it with your fingernails and try and pull it out. And I've noticed some of the cards, especially that NADAC one, just geometry-wise, they have like 1/10 of a millimeter different tolerances. So some of the cards I had to stick in and out like 20, 30 times to get them to read. And one of the issues that were reported in the Amazon comments or these difficulties just getting cards to read. So if you're having these issues, I managed to get all my cards to read. If you push it in and then give that extra little pressure on the back so it's well seated on those contacts, and then you should be able to get it to read on your computer. So this has been an interesting look at the Amazon cards and general SD cards that are available today. It's always a headache when you're looking for a new card and you're trying to figure out, is this one a little bit cheaper if you're going to get the best performance out of it? But looking through this rundown of cards, and these are sort of the most available ones you can get on Amazon, this would definitely be my recommendation for any like 4K video recording, drones, Raspberry Pis, whatever. Definitely go with the SanDisk Extreme series. Price-wise, very good deal, and especially if you get the card reader that's compatible with that faster read speed, you can definitely get the much better performance fast. My second choice is still the Samsung Evo series. Very good pricing. You can find them on sale on Amazon often enough. And if you're looking at a different card reader, this higher speed thing isn't just a SanDisk thing. I think you can get the different higher speed card readers from certainly Lexar, and SanDisk is making some. Probably Kingston has one of their own that might support the full format SD cards, and that might have a little bit better pin design to really read your cards reliably without those reading problems. So thanks for watching, and hope to see you next time. Bye-bye now.